Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing the book The Art of Medieval Manuscripts, and the cover is very shiny so it's kind of reflecting, but it just has the title in black here with kind of this raised bumpy version of some words in a medieval looking script. So unlike the other books that I've been reading about medieval manuscript illustration and illumination, this book focuses a lot more on the things that went into the process of making the manuscript, if that makes sense. The other books I've been reading have been really focusing on the illustrations themselves, they mean, the interesting beasts that are in it, the different scenes, what those scenes mean, the different kind of things that are depicted within it. And this book has a little bit of that, but the other books were really focused on the actual illustrations themselves. And this book was really more about what was everything that went into medieval manuscripts. So the illustration aspect and illumination aspect was there, but there was a lot of other things that went into it that this book covered. This book also gave me vibes of like the kind of book that would be in my history classroom in high school. It is a little bit older of a book. It was printed or was published in 1997. So it is a little dated if you're worried about like top level accuracy, but everything in here seemed to be relevant even today. So I don't think there's really any concerns there. This book, as I was saying, focuses a lot more with the work and the content and everything that went into medieval manuscripts as opposed to the illustrations in the manuscripts and what they mean and depict in and of themselves. For example, there was a whole section at the beginning which just discussed what kind of books there were, so the difference between textbooks and medical books and books of hours, I believe they were called, and psalters and Bibles and musical notation. So they just spent some time going over that. They also talk about the different influences that went in, such as the Byzantine influence, which is something I wasn't as familiar with, so they covered that in there. As we can see here, they have books that just discuss the apocalypse, musical manuscripts, which is really interesting. There's also these little overlays that are throughout the book. Some of them contain various bits of art, so these are just interesting. They just kind of separate, and they do have color illustrations, like I said here, but like this one is specifically discussing lives of saints and the types of illustrations and why lives of saints would be illustrated, and this just supports this up here. So it's talking a lot more about the nuts and bolts about medieval manuscripts as opposed to focusing on the illustrations themselves. We have herbals, romances, and literature. So they spend some time at the beginning talking about what sort of things would be illustrated. Then they go through a whole section. As you can see here, we have parchment, gatherings and their covers, preparing the page. So they quite literally go through how a manuscript would have been constructed. So right at the very beginning with the actual content of the pages and the cover, and then how it was written, and then how it was illustrated, which there was a fun fact in this book that I didn't actually know, and that was that reading and writing used to be two different skill sets, which to a modern person seems very interesting because at least I remember learning reading and writing around the same time, and they were definitely considered tied learning concepts, different things to learn. Writing is a different skill, I can see that, but they seem very connected in my head, and they make a point back in the day that writing and the reading would have been two different ideas or two different skill sets. So that was very interesting. So they go through again the scribes, the artists, who would have done that, would they have signed the work, how would they know what to draw or put in the different margins. Then they kind of go through different time periods, what was popular, the areas that were popular, as in the areas in Europe that produced a lot of these books, or a lot of these books and the different styles that characterize them. They also spent a very interesting time discussing the text, like the actual physical text, and the different styles that these texts were written in and how they influenced later fonts, which I thought was really interesting and something that wasn't discussed in the other books that I've been reading because those have focused more on illustration. So I thought that was a really interesting part in this book. Another thing that this book covered at the very end that I thought was really, really interesting, and my other books haven't covered as well, is how, it's right at the end, very short, but how printing actually changed or influenced the illustration, the manuscript illustration. And it said, so I would have thought immediately it would have made it obsolete, and eventually it did. We no longer hand copy things, at least not very frequently, and pretty much all your books are going to be printed. But at first when printing came out, it made those manuscripts much more valuable because they were kind of the original work. And also, I believe this is an example, when they would print things, I was just checking, when they would print things, they would still hand illustrate sections because I guess they liked the way it looked. And that dividing line, or how printing influenced manuscript and manuscript creation, isn't something that was covered in one of my other books. So I really liked that I got this out. I liked that this really went into the nuts and bolts of manuscript creation, and I learned a lot behind the scenes. I actually thought this would be a very good book to have started with. I didn't, but this would have been a very good book to have started with because it would have laid a really good foundation for me to read the other books, and I really do recommend. So again, this is The Art of Medieval Manuscripts. It's this gold brown cover, and I really liked it. I would give this a 3-star. It was very interesting, very knowledgeable, and I felt like I learned a lot from this book, learned a lot of interesting fun facts, and a little bit more about medieval manuscript creation. And if you've read this book or are interested in anything that I've said, I would recommend reading this. Other than that, everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.